As every week, we're going to show you things that happened since you last saw me. All these videos took place in the last week. We look at this map here of Gaza, and we've talked about many of these areas on the show already today. Nora talked about them in her newscast. Um, we're going to focus, at first, we're going to go from the south as usual. We're going to start in Rafah. At this zoom in here, we can see the Philadelphia corridor, which is still at the heart of the situation right now. The Israelis are trying to remain in the corridor. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, visited the Philadelphia corridor this week and said that to the troops that they were keeping the corridor. And the fighting this week, as pretty much for the last month, has been focused on Tel Sultan there in the west of Rafah. And pretty much that is the focus of the fighting in Rafah. The invasion is 115 days old in Rafah, which of course the Americans said was a red line. It was bulldozed by the Israelis, but that operation has been now focused pretty much primarily on the Philadelphia corridor as Israel attempts to hold this strategic corridor in negotiations for a prisoner exchange. Just to note, today is the 300th day of the ground war since the Israeli military invaded the Gaza Strip on the 27th of October. So 300 days of ground war. And on Tuesday, the 500th heavy airlift, the Israeli Ministry of Defense acknowledged the 500th heavy airlift by the United States of weapons and material to the Israelis to carry out this genocide. The Ministry of Defense boasted about that, and it's 500 heavy airlift airplanes, but there's also 107 ships, which are considerably larger than the airlifts, although the C-17s that fly the airlifts are massive planes. They're almost hard to believe the size of them. And it's been 50,000 tons of weapons delivered from the Americans to the Israelis, which are then turned around and dropped on the Gaza Strip, the tiny area that Nora described in her excellent newscast at the beginning. More than 55,000 airstrikes in this tiny territory that now Palestinians are pushed into 10% of, and that 10% is under threat by Israeli evacuation orders this week, as we saw the United Nations stop their operations the other day. So another week. Let's get started though on the resistance, because the resistance is steady. There is no indication of any decline in the resistance at all, despite what the Israelis say. This is a Namr troop carrier that's going to get an elevated Yasin strike. They still are firing these weapons consistently. There was more than a dozen operations by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 alone in Rafah this past week. You can see that strike is an elevated strike down on the roof of the Namr, and from too close for the active protection system to engage and through too much. And you can see again, videographers, the spotter, in the audio of this, you can hear the spotter saying fire. They're part of a team that carries out these operations. So that is in Tel Sultan. There was a couple of these strikes in Tel Sultan. We can go to number 2 after this one here, Tamara. This is the second one. Again, fighters down on the ground, moving through the streets still. You can see just the unbelievable destruction everywhere. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 gives us a little bit of a longer feed here of the exit of this fighter. And again, you can see no active protection system detonating in time for that round, also in Tel Sultan. And these are still, as ever, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 built Yasin 105 RPGs being used. No indication of any lack of these weapons, no indications of using other weapons. They're still using appropriate weapons in all of these instances. And this battle scene is from this week in Tel Sultan. And again, Tel Sultan is right on the edge of the Philadelphia corridor. So the Israelis are expanding this corridor. If we look at number 3 here, we've got anti-personnel Yasins being used here. You can see the soldiers in a window again, still 300 days on. You can see them coming out to smoke a dart here on the deck, just like they're not in an active war zone. And these guys are going to pay the price for this behavior, as ever. And this week, the Israelis claimed the most killed in action that they have in several months this week. And you can see this is a combination. This is a thermobaric warhead, an Iranian single charge 105 millimeter warhead that's being used here, and also an F7 fragmentation warhead. And they're using these in combination. We've been seeing this for a few weeks, maybe months now, using this as a standoff anti-personnel weapon, which is what they're designed for, being used properly. But the combination of the thermobaric, which is a fuel air explosion, the round has a powder and a fuel that distributes throughout the space, and it's ignited in a fire. And so the F7, the fragmentation warhead, which we'll see coming up in an operation, you can see the fragmentation is a devastating anti-personnel weapon. So they're using these from distance, and we've seen them use anti-personnel weapons, of course, packed as bombs, improvised explosive devices. So this combo of the F7, which is a North Korean fragmentation warhead, you can tell those by the red stripe around them if you're looking at these videos. And the single charge thermobaric warhead is the plump circle that you see. So this operation, again, successful, soldiers in a window, still doing it. Let's look at number 4 here, Tamara, because this is another operation. This is in Tel Sultan. This is an attack on the Kamal Adwan High School, which is the Israelis are using as a base. And this Qassam fighter in a flak jacket here, he's pointing out that the tanks are right outside. He says, look at that soldier with his head popping out. And then they're going to track these 7 triangles heading into the school, using the school as a base. Of course, every accusation of the Israelis is a projection of their own activities. They immediately go to these schools as their bases. And when they're not bombing the schools of Palestinians in sheltering in these schools, they're using them as bases. And you can see the round in this one. You can see the round coming from the upper right to the left. You can see the sustainer motor kick in on the rocket-propelled grenade that's hitting there. And this fighter, he's saying, when we go back around, the fighter's saying, yeah, the fighter's holding, actually, in his hand, you can see he's holding a guerrilla action device. This is a close quarters battle that we're seeing here. We took out the audio of this, still trying to dodge guidelines to keep these videos on air. This is them firing on this after the operation, firing. So the close quarters battle took place after. And when we loop back around here, I'll show you. You can see he's holding the guerrilla action device there. That was what we saw them building during the war a couple months back. And he says, oh, Netanyahu, we will shake you to your core. We're not afraid of these tanks next to us. And that's what he's looking at there out the window. The spotter, the cameraman, looks out the window and shows the tanks right outside. He says, we are right in front of them, and you're doing nothing. God willing, we'll bring the hammer down on your head, which is the way that they're approaching this operation. Again, 7 triangles heading into this building, and the tank crewmen hanging outside of the tank there. And again, you can notice the sustainer motor coming through the as this round comes through the screen there. It's kind of neat. You don't usually see that, but I guess it's perfect angle for that. And during this gunfight that's going to break out here, this close quarters battle that follows up this combination. Again, this is the thermobaric. This is a Qassam thermobaric, and then the F7. That's a combo they're using again. And then during this shootout, they say, here we are, the Tel Sultan battalion, with a little more energy than that. But obviously, these fighters are consistently fighting with a certain joy to be defending their people, defending their territory. In face of liquidation, the Israelis keep saying they're been liquidated, and it's of course never the case. This is another example of it. And then so number 5 here is actually the second part of this operation. The first part was the attack on the school, and these are the armored vehicles that are protecting the school. This is a high school in Tel Sultan, and you can see an elevated Yasin strike there right into the turret gap, which is what they're aiming for. that APS, the active protection system that went off there, missed the round. It detonated after the round hit. And you can see that on this too. When you don't see the massive flare of flame, that's what you have, a penetration. And that's what the goal of the 𝐓𝐴𝐶𝐞, the tandem charge, the goal is to send a pierce. It's to pierce. The tanks don't explode in the sense that sometimes you see in Ukraine or in Russia. The goal is to pierce the tank and send the hot steel inside the tank, and then the tank ignites from the inside, or it just bounces around in the steel bathtub where these soldiers are inside the tank. The tank is a crew of 10 and usually has an infantry, a bunch of infantry soldiers in there, usually between 4 and 6 inside the tank. So it's close quarters, and when those pieces go flying around, the soldiers inside the tank die. And there was 2 killed in action by the Israeli military this week that they admitted were from anti-tank fire, and that's from 𝐓𝐴𝐶𝐞s. So people sometimes wonder why you don't see the spectacular destruction, although we have seen several spectacular destructions. You can see in the casualty reports that the soldiers are being killed by anti-tank fire, and we took out the audio in this part, but the guy at the end basically goes, "Oh shit," for hitting it, for his buddy hitting that round from a pretty good distance and from an elevated spot. So he was impressed with that shot. Number 6 here, this is an interesting operation. A complex ambush takes place. They're scouting this position that Qassam says has 23 soldiers plus a special forces unit. And you can see this commander here marking out the operation. They put the triangle on the stick man that he's drawing in the window, but he's drawing a floor plan, and the floor plan is accurate. He's got the kitchen with the master bedroom beside it with an ensuite. He's got the staircase, the guest room. He draws the head of the soldiers, and then this is the tunnel ambush. That's the second part of this operation. So he's marking where the soldiers would go. You can see there's the F7 with the red stripe on it, and these fighters going through the tunnel, still using their tunnels in Tel Sultan. This is in Khan Yunis, where Khan Yunis was 6 months of operation in Khan Yunis to destroy tunnels, and the fighters are still using it here. So that's setting up the operation, and this is the execution of the operation. The soldier in a window. You're going to see the Qassam-built thermobaric warhead hit here, and the overpressure blows the curtains right out of the building. So you have an infantry force in that building. And then you can see there, that's the F7. You can see the fragmentation element of that in that strike. And then they have multiple camera angles on this operation because they've been casing this building for multiple days, as they point out in this video. And you can see the inside of the room there, how the thermobaric warhead works and why it's such a devastating anti-personnel weapon. You fire it into these Israeli positions inside a building, and it fills the entire floor with the explosion. And these operations, again, there you can see the fragmentation element of the F7. Each of those are pieces of hot steel flying around. And so the combination of these 2 weapons is a tactical thing that we didn't see earlier in the war, but we have seen for the last couple months being used very effectively. Now these fighters are going to go underground here and link up this Radia anti-personnel weapon. If you can get through the tunnels, you do the anti-personnel weapon. If you're standoff, you fire the anti-personnel weapon with a 𝐓𝐴𝐶𝐞. So here they're fighters detonating in a tunnel entrance in Khan Yunis. This is in Al-Qarara on the north, to the north of Khan Yunis. The operations of the 98th Division have been moving around. Again, look at here. He's got the entire floor plan of the building, and he's got it in 3 dimensions because they're going to fire from the side angles. So those windows on the side are key to the way this operation takes place. And so, again, you can see the triangles on his stick man. The boys have a sense of humor and a sense of purpose, both in their operations, which is something that we have seen consistently, and communicating with each other. And it's a commander, which is showing command and control. These operations are tunnel-borne operations. The Israelis haven't even come close to dealing with the tunnels. They're still, anytime you see Israeli tunnel achievements, they're talking about achievements that are less than 10 meters deep, which is essentially basements. The tunnel apparatus, especially in Rafah, in Tel Sultan, these tunnels are 80 meters deep, so they're not even close to getting down to the layers that would neutralize the tunnels. And as Israeli military people have said, there's not enough TNT in Gaza to destroy 500 miles of tunnels under Gaza. They don't know how many miles of tunnels, but 500 is the number that they've been using this war. Yahya Sinwar said 500 kilometers a couple of years ago, so it's a believable number. And you can see the round blowing out the curtains that the Israelis love to put on these otherwise empty buildings to indicate where they are. And these positions, they feel safe in these. They clearly feel safe in these positions, and they are clearly not safe. There's fighters all around. We're watching here from 3 different camera angles. So you saw the people getting briefed by the commander. You saw multiple fighters involved in the operation. You saw the bomb linker and detonator, and then you're seeing 3 cameramen. So they're all over this area, casing intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance of Israeli positions. And because of the predictive nature of their intelligence, they're predicting the route that the Israelis will take to that tunnel entrance. So really interesting operation there in Khan Yunis, after the Khan Yunis brigade was under attack for 6 straight months from December until the Ramadan ambush, when they got chased out. And now they're carrying on in Khan Yunis with the 98th Division and have met nothing but resistance. 15 operations this week alone in Khan Yunis. So as you can see, this guy doing his sketch again. Okay, let's go to number 7, Tamara, because we have rocket fire here. We have the M90, named after, you can see the size of this rocket, named after Ibrahim Makadma, who was a senior Qassam founder, a founding fighter and thinker. And you can see this fighter says, "The mission we are executing is on the occupied city of Tel Aviv, which will be under fire from the Al-Qassam brigades. And the enemy will know, no matter how much they try, no matter how much they believe they've accomplished their goals, here we are on the ground fighting. We will bomb them with rockets of this heavy caliber. This is our land, and the land knows who loves it, and the enemy is a stranger to it." So we're seeing these M90 rockets. These were the smaller version of this, the M75, was the first rockets fired out of Gaza to hit Tel Aviv, and that happened in the 2012 war. And you can see him here with his iron peacemaker, peace enforcer rocket controller, which is a play on the Iron Dome. And you can see the rockets heading up, and in the background of this video, you can hear a kid shout from one of the camps in the distance, "There it goes." So you often get in these rocket videos cheering from people inside Gaza when they go off. That's actually been the case for decades when these go off. And then you can see that was from a makeshift launcher to launch those heavier rockets on Tel Aviv. And these are shorter range rockets that are fired on Israeli concentrations on the other side of the border of Khan Yunis. So these rockets were fired from Khan Yunis right under the nose of the Israelis while they're carrying out this operation. And of course, civilians have been pushed out of Khan Yunis. So there's no civilians. These are being fired right under the nose of the Israelis. And if we go back one more time quickly, Tamara, you can see when they're programming the rocket controller, you can see they're setting the time, and this is going to be something that's relevant for the Hezbollah operation too. The rocket controller sets the time of the launch, so they set up in the day, they set up beforehand, they set the rocket up, and then they program the launch to be for after dark. Usually they program them for 9 p.m. And that's part of the psychological operation, is that they tell you that the rockets are coming at 9 p.m. And then they do. And the Israelis are looking for where those rockets are launched. The Israelis, look at this launcher here, this makeshift launcher that they're using. The Israelis dug in. The Israelis bragged that they blew up this launcher, this buried launcher. So they're just scrambling for any kind of So you see there, he's setting the time there for the launch, and he's setting the multiple launches. And so the fighters are gone from this area when the rockets are fired. And if there's counter fire, counter battery fire, the fighters are gone from that area at the time. And that's going to be something that we see in the Hezbollah operation coming up too. And again, these are named the M90s after Ibrahim 𝐓𝐿𝐾𝐿, and 𝐓𝐾𝐿 was an important leader of 𝐓𝐡𝐞. He wrote a book about the path of armed struggle, Guideposts on the Road to Liberating Palestine, 1994. That's an important book that's studied by the fighters and read widely in Gaza, talking about not repeating failed mistakes, how to build the culture of armed struggle. And a lot of those things now, 30 years on from that book being written, have really come to fruition. And that's one of the reasons why the Qassam brigades and Hamas more broadly are not able to be defeated. They're not a group that you can defeat. These ideas are embedded in the population, and the spirit of resistance is a critical part of their popularity. It's all their popularity. And so the Israelis have failed, of course, in all of their objectives against Qassam, and they will for generations to come because of this kind of, in part because of these leaders that were assassinated. 𝐓𝐾𝐿 was assassinated in 2003. He was partly responsible for the plan to attack the settlements in the Gaza Strip in the latter half of the Second Intifada. He's credited with the operation that blew up Merkava tanks on the outside of settlements, one particularly in Beit Lahia, that the Israelis said they were responding to when they assassinated him. And these tank destroying operations were part of the reason that the Israelis left the Gaza Strip, because these operations were a qualitative increase in the nature of the operation than anything that they had experienced before in the 40 years of the settlement project. So again, naming their weapons after very important people. And if you want to study the Qassam brigades, you can look through their weapons and look at who they're named after and do a little reading about who they are, and you can see why they named those weapons after them. So that is the South, Khan Yunis and Rafah operations. Again, more than 30 operations combined in those two locations just in the last 7 days. So no indication of any degrading. Of course, the war is costly. The war is costly for Palestinians. It's costly for the fighters. It's costly for the Israelis. It's costly for Israeli citizens as well. So we're not pretending that it's not costly, but in terms of destroying the military infrastructure of the group, we're not seeing any indications of that being true.